Good afternoon and welcome to this session about Zero Trust admins, why you should start using Azure AD Privileged Identity Management today. My name is Vidar Elven, and before I proceed with the presentation, let's take a quick minute to appreciate the sponsors. ScriptRunner, DQ Global, Proximo 3, Redspire, Agilicis and Hitachi Solutions has all been a great part of making this conference a reality and giving you all that great content. As I said, my name is Vidar Elven. I'm from Norway. I work as a senior architect at a company called Scale. I'm an MVP in enterprise mobility, focusing mainly on the management and automation of cloud technologies and specifically the identity and access management scenarios you often meet in those solutions. You can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn and GitHub. I really want to connect with you. My tag name is Vidar Elven, as you can see on the screen, and I also blog at gotoguy.blog. If there's one main takeaway for this session, is that you should be really cheap when it comes to admin privileges. You should really hold back on that, and I will explain that later today. When I grew up, I learned about the stereotype that Scots were sheep. I maybe got that from reading Donald Duck, and Scrooge McDuck, he was really sheep. In real life, this might not be true, but one thing that's really true is that you should be sheep with the admin privileges. I have named this session Zero Trust Admins, and the reason is that I want to base this session on the Zero Trust principles. And there are three main principles for Zero Trust. Always verify, never trust. Always authenticate and authorize based on all the available data points you have, including the user's identity, location, device and health, which service application you are trying to access, and any risk-based signals and so on. Use least privilege access. Use policies like just in time and just enough access. Apply risk to those policies and help secure your services also from a privileged access scenario. Assume breach. Make sure that if you have a vulnerability and maybe an attack, that that attack is not able to move laterally inside your environment and expose other services as well. Enter Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. This solution is the perfect match for securing privileged access for admin roles, Azure resources, and now also for groups. So how does it work? Well, Azure AD PIM, it lets you give role assignments, and those role assignments can either be eligible or active. If they are eligible, the user is not permanently an admin, but they elevate themselves when they need to. You can set an assignment start and end time. This is perfect for projects. For example, if some user needs access to being a device administrator for a certain amount of time. Maybe you have consultants involved in a project in your company and you invite those consultants as guest users. You can assign roles to them as well, meaning that you can keep control and make sure that they don't have access any more than they need to. You can require a MFA on activation. So you can, for example, say that if the user is not already protected by MFA, they will be prompted for MFA when they activate the role. And speaking about activation, you can set activation period also for a certain amount of time. For example, if you elevate yourself for global admin, you will be that for 1 hour. If you elevate yourself for Exchange Administrator, then you can maybe have that for 8 hours, for example. You can implement approvals, so somebody has to approve assignments. You can require justification so that you have to write something to justify, and this is something you can monitor and audit as well. And you have a rich set of possibilities for getting alerts, audits, and monitoring as well. I mentioned that Azure AD PIM is working for Azure AD roles. So let's take a quick look into that. There are many Azure AD roles now you can protect by PIM, but you should always start with the most permission-based roles, like global admin, privileged role admin, which is the PIM admin, by the way, security admin, user admin, application admin, and so on. You also have role-specific roles like Exchange admin, SharePoint admin, Intune, and Cloud Application Administrator, which basically lets you manage all your app registrations and enterprise apps in your Azure AD. So these roles is something maybe you should focus on first, but there might be other roles in your environment that you want to protect as well. When it comes to Azure resources, you can apply PIM on different kinds of scopes. So the following scopes can be protected by PIM: management groups, you can protect subscriptions, you can protect resource groups, and you can protect individual resources as well. In preview now, you can also have privileged access groups. This lets you use Azure AD groups for enabling for all assignments. So if you have one role that, for example, if you want a lot of people be able to be authentication administrator, then you can create a group and you can let that group be assigned to that role. And every member can then be part of that role assignment. You can also let the group itself be managed by PIM so that you can have eligible group members and owners. This way you elevate yourself as a member or an owner only when you need to. So all this will come in a later demo, but the first demo I want to start with today is how to get started using Azure AD PIM. So let's go. So to get started using Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, we need to go into the Azure AD portal. You can access that portal from portal.azure.com or aad.portal.azure.com. What I'm showing now is just a demo tenant I've created for this purpose. Inside, I can go to Azure Active Directory and I will find there under Identity Governance, we will see that there are some main components of identity governance solutions, and one of them is privileged identity management. We can also access privileged identity management directly by going to all services and finding Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. If you are going to use this consistently, you might even start it so you have it easily accessible on your menu. So when we click into Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, we will get some quick start resources, and I can go down to the manage part. As I mentioned earlier when I had the introduction here, there are 3 main resources we can manage with PIM. Those are the Azure Active Directory roles, those are the Azure resources, and we have the new privileged access groups in preview. So let's go into Azure AD roles first. What I see when I go into Azure AD role is that I have some quick launches for different scenarios, but what I want to start with is the discovery and insights, and this is something you should start with as well if you're new to Azure AD PIM. For this discovery and insights preview would show you some of the most important discovered assignments you already have. You can see here that I have 6 permanent global administrator assignments. I have seen environments with 10-fold and many global administrator assignments. So this is something where you should look first. So if you go into reduce global admins, you can see that I have a certain amount of users being permanent global administrator. So what I want to do is first of all is that I want to select some of those users to be eligible. So these 3 users, I want them to be able to be global admin, but they have to elevate themselves. So I make them eligible. So it's working with that. And while that is working, you can see that I have some remaining assignments. I see one of the users I selected didn't get eligible, so let's do it one more time. Make sure that you don't lock yourself out, because some of these roles will require MFA on activation, and if you don't have control on your MFA environment, you need to set up and use some accounts that are kind of emergency access accounts. So a couple of users that have the name of a break the glass or emergency access account, where you store a secret password for that, store it in a safe. Even better, create a FIDO2 authentication method for those users, so that you securely can access your tenant if something is wrong with the MFA, for example. So let's make another eligible, and this guy Nestor, I'm thinking that he has some other responsibilities in my company now, so I will just remove the assignment altogether. So he cannot even elevate himself from after this. So this is where you start. You can also, if you're unsure if some of those admins should be global admins or not, you can create something called an access review. You can ask the users themselves, you can ask a manager for the users, or you can set a certain person in your organization that should be responsible for evaluating that access. So then you can create an access review. We'll get into that in a later demo. This is the first thing I want to do. The next thing I want to do is looking at other privilege roles. There are a certain amount of privileged roles you want to protect in your Azure AD tenant. So if I click on eliminate standing access, you can see that Azure AD PIM has detected that I have 8 other highly privileged roles that I have assigned users to. So one of them is privileged role administrator. So the privileged role administrator is the one that's responsible for PIM. You should have a couple of users here that are responsible for the day-to-day management of PIM and roles assignments. And then I have some user administrator. I can see that I have a security administrator. So these are some assignments I just made for the demo purpose now. But likewise, when I looked at the global admin, I can select those and make them eligible. And this is something you should do. Nobody should be permanent admin, because they are just using these admin rights at certain times when they need to. So making them eligible is a good security practice. So it's getting there, yeah. And so on. So I can save some time on my demo here, but without clicking through everyone, but you get the picture. And the last thing I want to show is the following. Let's see, if I go to this last box here, I can review service principles. For sometimes you create some service principles that have access to roles or maybe Azure resources, and then you can see what kind of service principle do you have that have a standing role assignment. I have a graph service principle I have created that has been assigned the user administrator role. That means that this service principle could go in and get all my users, for example, in some applications or something. So this is something you want to keep an eye on. And I can also remove assignments here. But service principles cannot be eligible because they are not interactive. They are running as themselves and as an application. So this is a starting point. You can get an overview of all the roles inside the manage and roles. There you can see which kind of roles can I assign PIM assignments to. So there are a lot of roles in Azure AD now. This has constantly been growing the last few years. So basically you can, the old limitation was, I need to be a global admin because I need to do this and this and this. And now you can just find the correct roles. So if you want to have a user that needs to manage your team's environment, for example, then you can have the team's administrator. And if I click into that, I can see any existing assignments, who are eligible, are there any active assignments now, or assignments expired, which I, for example, can renew if I need to. I can also see a description of the role and the privileges, the role permissions. So this is the actual role permissions for this role. And I can go to some role settings. So when I have the team's administrator role, I can, for example, say that people that activate a role, they can have that role activated for a certain amount of hours. For example, 8 hours. I can set to require justification. This means that the user has to type something. I need to be an admin because I have something to do. You can also integrate via the ticketing. So if you have a help desk system, you can do ticketing and some custom processes there. You can also require approval, so set somebody to be able to approve. So basically, eligible role assignments, people can self-activate anytime they want, and then they get the role because you have pre-approved it, kind of with the assignment. But requiring approval is the next step, so you can have somebody internal that needs to approve that assignment activation, and then the user gets the active role. So, and I can select who will be approved, and then I can set another settings like, is it even allowed to have permanent eligible assignments or permanent active assignments, and expiry, and I can require Azure multi-factor authentication on active assignment, so they need to have an MFA in their access token when they activate the role. This means that if the user hasn't been prompted for MFA already, they need to do that extra step before they can get the role. So that's a great security feature. So there are a lot of notification settings. Who gets notified? The users can self-get notification. You have been assigned a role. You have now activated your role, and so on. And also admins can get those roles. So a lot of different settings. I will keep it very quick here now. So this is the start. So you find roles. You try to assign people to different roles. Some people might be member of several roles, and they can activate that role they need at that time. That's a great way to avoid using the global administrator, because this is something you shouldn't have too many of. And we can likewise go in and see the different assignments we already have assigned to the different roles. So if I go into, for example, eligible assignments, I can see which users are eligible for activating themselves, and if there are a certain end time to that activation, and I can also do some updating of those roles. I can see which assignments are all active now. This view here will contain two types of users: those that are actively assigned and those that have eligible assignments but have activated them for a certain period. So if I want to assign someone new here, I can go to Add Assignment, and I can say that I want someone to be Teams administrator, and then I go and click on Select Members. And from Select Members, I can go into my user list, or I can search. I can just select some random user here, like Miriam. So the demo tenant is a great way to start learning with this, because you get all the features, you have a certain amount of users and groups and so on, so you can just start playing with Azure AAD PIM. So, and then I click Next, and you can see that I now can select what type of assignment. So most users will be eligible. I don't want permanent active assignments. And I can also set that Miriam is working as a Teams administrator for the next 3 months, so I can say, okay, she can start today. And the assignment will end on not 2022, but let's say June 1st this year. And then I can click Assigned. And this means that Miriam now is both eligible for activating her role as a Teams administrator, but she will also only be allowed to do that in the period from now and until June 1st. And this way I can go in and really have good control over my admin assignments. So a quick change of the subscriptions. I'm now away from the demo tenant and using my own personal test environment to just have a quick look at Azure resources. So basically you can manage your Azure resources the same way you can manage Azure AD roles. The only thing is that you have in Azure resources, you will work on a management group level, or a subscription level, or resource groups, or even the individual resource. So in that case, you can go in and manage who can be active assigned or eligible assigned to every kind of these levels. So that, for example, you can have eligible owners or contributors to your subscription, or you can have active assignments for a certain period for a resource group. So that makes it really flexible. So other than that, all assignments work quite similarly to what they look like in Azure AD. So we don't spend any time on that here now. But basically, I wanted to show you how you can manage those type of resources inside the privileged identity management as well. And the last part is the privileged access groups. So you can manage your groups inside the privileged identity management. For example, I have a group here that I have assigned members or owners to, and they can elevate themselves as members and owners as well. If you want to have a user, a new group that you want to be able to assign to roles, then you can only do that in creating a new group, because you cannot use existing groups for this scenario. So you always need to go to groups, and only currently supported is cloud groups for now. So if you go to groups and then select to create a new group, and then you can see that I will have here the possibility to specify a group type. I can use security or Microsoft 365. I can call this Scottish Summit demo, for example. And this is the important part: specify that Azure AD roles can be assigned to the group, which is a preview functionality now, and then I can just create that. And that means that when I assign roles, for example, if I want to assign a role in Azure AD, like getting users to be able to elevate themselves as authentication administrators or someone, yeah, I can assign that role to this group, but only the groups that has been flagged for assigned for role based activation, as I specified when I created the group. I can also go into those groups and specify. I have here privileged access. So I can now go into this group and specify that I want to enable privileged access for membership to this group. And then I can add assignments. So I can set that my user, for example, my test user, should be able to elevate himself as a member. I can also elevate users to be owners, so they can elevate themselves to do group administrations, for example. So if I then specify my personal test user here, there we are. I can also include guests if I want to. And then next I can say that this user should be able to elevate themselves as member of the group. So this is how this works. So let's quickly go into a scenario where I look at the user experience of it all. So I'm inside a user portal now, just my standard portal profile or something. And a quick way to educate your users is to go to AK, AMS, and My Roles. So everybody that has been assigned a role, if you give them that link, they can go directly in. And yeah, I need to authenticate, and then I will get into the privileged identity management blade. And as you can see, as soon as it refreshes here, I will get an overview over privileged identity management. Now I'm logged in as a normal user, but I can go to my roles, and I will see all my roles for Azure AD assignments. And these are my eligible assignments. So now I can go in and activate. If I want to be global administrator for a period, I can go and activate that. Exchange admin and so on. And I can also go into privileged access groups and I can see that I can now activate myself as a member of the Scottish Summit demo. So then I will be a member, but if I'm not activated, I will not be shown as a member. So this is a great way to have dynamic groups based on activation. And likewise, I can go to my Azure resources if I have been assigned to any. So that's the user part of this. Let's get back to the presentation and look at some monitoring and auditing and follow up on the important part of getting governance and control of your PIM solution. When we have set up the Azure AD PIM solution, then we need to have a continuous evaluation of which roles are needed and which roles are not needed anymore. That we can do with something called access reviews. Access reviews is part of the identity governance solutions of Azure AD. With access reviews, we can review Azure AD roles. We can, for example, check if a user don't have to be a global admin anymore. Maybe they need another role, or they can be removed altogether. Likewise, we can do access reviews for Azure resources, meaning that we can also check the need for continuous role assignments to Azure resources on the selected level. Another part that's important is having an overview, looking at the usage of the solution. Monitoring and overviews provides an overview picture of how many people are assigned to different roles and some statistics for usage activity. Audit logs provides a full trail of role assignments, role removals, role activations, and so on. So that's also very valuable into the usage. And alerts, you can also get alerts based on something that happens in the solution. Some of the alerts are built in and sent to some of the admin roles, but you can also provide custom alerts via the integration of monitoring and alerts with Azure Monitor. If you integrate Azure AD audit logs with a log analytics or Sentinel workspace, you can use Azure Monitor for querying and alerting on events and operations. So let's look into a demo for access reviews and how we can use monitoring for evaluating usage reports. Okay, let's do a quick demo on access reviews and the monitoring and audit solutions we have available. First of all, if you go into the privileged identity management solution, you can, for example, go into Azure AD roles or Azure resources. And if you go into Azure AD roles, as I will show now, first of all, you will have an overview page. And the overview page will show you a complete picture of role activations the last 7 days, what kind of role assignment distribution do you have, how many are eligible, how many are permanent. You should look into the permanent ones, and you can also see by roles. So this is a great overview and picture of your organization. When you start doing this, and if you have a lot of users in different roles and you have a lot of permanent users, this is really fun to follow along and see the footprint and reducing your attack vulnerability. There are some alerts, built-in alerts you get here. For example, that there are 3 roles that don't require multi-factor authentication for activation, so I could look into that. There are some potential stale accounts in the previous role, so there are some users that are not using their role, so that's a great feature for access reviews. And I have too many global administrators. I have 5 now. That's a low risk level because you should have less than 5, depending on your environment, of course. Access review, that's what I wanted to show you now. So if I go in, I can create a new access review, and I can select that, for example, I will create an access review for my global admins. Global admin yearly access review, for example. And I can have a description, start day, I will start today. I can set a frequency, so I want this done annually. And the review period should be completed in 30 days. I can also set a specific end date for this first period. scope is everyone, and I can select which roles I want to do an access review for. For example, as I mentioned, this is for global admins, so let's select that role. There we are, done. And then I can select who are going to be reviewers. I can let users review themselves. That way they will get an email and they have to say, yes, I still need to be a global administrator. For example, by doing that, I can also set that if users are saying, yes, I need to continue to be a global admin, then I can say enable auto apply. They will keep being that global admin. If they don't respond, then I can say, for example, remove the access. That's good, because then I can actually follow up on that. So if people don't respond, they are getting removed. And I can go into advanced settings as well and select other parameters for this assignment. Let's see here, there we are. So I can show some recommendations. I can require reasoning, so they have to type something why they need. Set up mail notifications and reminders if they're not doing this and have some additional comment. So I can go and click start on that. The other options for reviewers are in preview now. You can send that review to their manager, their registered manager object, and also I can set a specific 1 or 2 reviewers to do that review based on the user's current needs. So you have some options, and this is something you should look into, especially for the most sensitive roles, and do it as a regular occurrence, yearly, semi-annually, something like that. But please look into access reviews. It's a great way to keep your current settings up and running. I also mentioned that we have some auditing, so I can go and look at my audits. What's my traffic? What's my audit log using PIM? So I can see that. This audit traffic is also inside the normal Azure AD audit log, so I can also see that as a part of there. But this is a subset related to PIM. So here I can follow up. I can also do a complete resource audit for all the PIM management that both me and other users do. So this is something you should follow up on. And then you can go into the alerts part, and you can see what kind of roles do I have, what kind of alerts do I have set up, and I can also go into setting and define what kind of alert settings do I want to use in my organization. So I can disable some of the rules, for example. So this is something you will get an email on. If people are starting assigning roles outside privileged identity management, this is something you should be notified about, because hey, we are not using permanent admins here, we are using PIM. So make sure that we have control of that. And the last part was that since these are based on audit log in Azure AD, and if we have set up an integration with logs integration from Azure AD into Log Analytics and Azure Monitor, either by using Sentinel workspaces or traditional Log Analytics workspaces, we can query. For example, I can go and run for category role management. I can see all the operations I have done for a certain amount of time. This is just the last hour. I can go back in time as well, depending on the retention set on the Log Analytics. So basically, I'm just doing the demos today, so there are not many history events here. I can also go in and do some summarizing and so on. So you see that this is the different kinds of operations that has been done in the demo. So inside each of those audit entries, I can go in and see all the details. For example, which user initiated this action, what are the target resources, and so on. So I have a lot of different information here I can really delve into, and I can create alerts. And if I create alerts, I can use Azure Monitor. I can actually trigger something. I have one example of that is that I send messages to a team, Microsoft Teams team, every time alerts triggers. That this is something I want to follow up on, for example. So it's a good part of identity governance. So with that, we can go to the next part of this presentation. But remember to follow up with access reviews and follow up your audits and monitoring. That's an important part of PIM. For most IT pros, you will look into scenarios where you can automate. And for Azure AD PIM, there are a couple of solutions for automating as well. You can use PowerShell. The Azure AD Preview PowerShell module, which you can get from the PowerShell gallery, contains commands for managing role assignments, requests, and settings. You can also use the Microsoft Graph API. Currently in beta preview, there are a collection of requests that can be used for managing role assignments, requests, and settings via the Graph API as well. Currently, as it's in the beta program, only delegated permissions are supported, so you need an interactive or logged on user to explore the API. That puts a little bit limitation on some of the automation scenarios if you want to do something in behind without a user involved. But that will eventually be there. So for example, you can build PIM apps using Graph API. You can build your own user interface. You can create a mobile application or a web page. You can create an application inside Teams and so on. But you can also create Power Apps, for example. So I have a previous example here. I haven't really upgraded it yet because the beta APIs for PIM is new now. But previously we used a Power App where I could explore and get my roles and activate them directly in the Power App. To be able to do that today, you need to create an app registration in Azure AD. There you can select the correct graph permissions for privileged roles. Then you will go to Power Platform and create a custom connector in which you can refer to that app registration and authenticate users using delegated permissions. And then you can get the different operations, for example, getting roles, sending a role activation request, and so on. So when you have that custom connector, then you can build flows. For example, one flow can be sending a request for getting my roles, and then you process that and you get that processed data, and you can respond that data out from the flow. And you can have different flows for activating or deactivating your role and so on. And when you have that different flows set up, then you can create a Power App, and you can use that Power App to trigger those flows and get the data into your Power App. So basically, using those 4 steps, it will take some time, and I will probably rebuild my Power App and see if I can publish as a community solution. But then you can really have some nice automation scenarios where you can activate your roles using that app. But first, let's look at how we can use the automation and APIs using PowerShell and some basic Graph API queries in this demo. So, last part, some automation scenarios. You can use PowerShell for managing your Azure AD privileged identity management. You need to download and install the Azure AD Preview module because this functionality is in beta. I have provided some examples, and this is available for you publicly in the GIST. So you can see here at this link I provide on the screen now. You can go and get these commandlets and try this yourself. But after connecting to Azure AD, you can go and get some variables for tenant, user, which user I want to get role assignments for. There's a command here for getting my role assignments. You need to specify Azure AD roles when working against the Azure AD role assignments, or you can specify Azure resources if you want to go to Azure resources. The resource ID for Azure AD roles is always the tenant ID, and then I can filter on user object ID, for example. So if I want to get all the role definitions by display name, I can filter on that as well. So basically, getting my roles, as I've done here, it would just return me a list of IDs for the roles I have been assigned to. So if I want to get the information in more readable format, then I can go and build a custom object like here, and I can just build in the ID of the role, the ID of the role definition, the display name, and so on. So if I've done this in this example, I will just do this. I can see that it will work through my role assignments and getting the different details. And here we are. So this is the roles I've been assigned to with my user and the role assignment state. And note that it's very important to have the correct role assignment ID and or the role definition ID if we need to activate it later. So if I want to activate a role, I can go to schedule and create a new schedule object that's required. where I need to specify the type, for example, a once time activation. I can have a start date time and a duration, or I can specify an end time. The duration is in ISO format, so this is 1 hour. And then I will open the request and specifying the provider, schedule, resource, and the definition ID of the role, and then the user, and then I also need to have the state that I want to get from eligible to active, and then this is a type user add, because users, this is when user activate the roles, and I need to provide a reason as well. So running this, it should be successful, and we can see that it will open that role activation. So yeah, it was successful. So now this role is active. Another way to check role activations is going to the Graph API. You can use Graph Explorer for that. You can query against the beta endpoint, because that's only available in beta for now. Privileged access, AAD roles, and the resources is the tenant ID. And you can also include a filtering here for subject ID to be the user's object ID. So if I run that, I will get all the resources my user has been assigned to, and if there are any active role assignments, and one of them should be active now because I activated it just now in PowerShell. This is the one. So all IDs here as well. If I want to activate a role, for example, if I want to activate some of those roles, like this one, this is the Exchange Administrator role. It's just I remember the role definition ID. I need that ID, and I also need that external ID, which is the role assignment ID. And if I want to activate a role, I need to create a post request, and I will go to beta privileged access AAD roles and role assignment request, and then I need to have a request body. And that request body is contains the role definition ID, resource is the tenant, subject is the user, and so on. And I also have the schedule information here. And then I can link also that role assignment ID I mentioned just previously. So that's a very quick summary of automation possibilities. Let's get back to finishing the presentation. So we are at the end of the presentation now. I hope you have learned a thing or two. Some summary points from me to you. Start using Azure AD PIM today. Protect your most important security roles in Azure AD and start managing your Azure subscriptions. You will need to get the licenses. Microsoft 365 E5 contains everything you need also for Azure AD PIM. You can also have the Enterprise Mobility and Security add-on for E5, or the E5 Security add-on for existing E3 suites is also a possible way to get this solution. Azure AD Premium P2 as a standalone plan will also give you the privileged identity management solutions available. If you don't have any of these, because this license might cost your organization a little bit, you can start evaluating the feature and activate a 19-day trial if you haven't done that already. With the trial, you can get a good overview over your current role assignments and get started using this solution. In any case, I would recommend you that if you don't have licenses for everyone, have enough licenses for using PIM for your most sensitive admin roles. So everybody that's affected by PIM needs a license. So if you give a role assignment or manage a role assignment, then you need to have a license for that user. Educate your privileged users. Tell them how to wear, how, when, how to activate, and how to manage their roles, so they constantly use this in the right way. Most admins will be a little reluctant in the beginning because they have been maybe used to being a permanent admin, but if you explain why you do this and also give them the tools that they want, then they will be able to quickly activate and use that role, and they will understand why we have it. And the last point is monitor and review access. You have to regularly monitor and perform access reviews to keep your list of admins up to date and correct in line with the Zero Trust least privilege access principle. So with that, thank you very much for listening. I will be, after this session, I will be available for some Q&A. So keep your questions coming and I will answer as good as I can. Hope to see you again in the physical event in the near future. But until then, bye bye from Norway and bye bye from me.